Hi, my name's Thete and we're going to be discussing Hedonites of Slaanesh for, I think, the last time for a little while. I've done a few videos on the new release, mostly around having a look at the new units because there were quite a lot of new units. Unlike with Daughters of Kane where it was changes to essentially existing units. And I'm going to go over sort of my analysis, my mathematical modelling for the Hedonites of Slaanesh. Now, I'm going to do something similar for Daughters of Kane as well. The reason I've done so many videos on Hedonites of Slaanesh from this point of view is twofold, really. First of all, the changes in Hedonites of Slaanesh are more contentious. I think with Daughters of Kane, it was much more clearly, yes, they've lost things, they've gained things. Overall, they've gained. The battle tome for Daughters of Kane is a win. For the Daughters of Kane. I haven't heard anyone say otherwise that's actually backed it up with a reason. Whereas the same thing can't be said of Hedonites of Slaanesh. And I'm going to go over, first of all, how I've sort of worked out my larger model. So I did a video where I was arguing that the mortal units for Hedonites of Slaanesh are not overpointed, as some people have been saying, which I think is been a bit of a reactionary reaction. But that was the quick version of my modelling. So I'm going to show you the sort of modelling I do on all armies now. And I'm going to explain in a bit more detail in this video so that, over time, people who are interested in it will sort of know where I'm coming from when I do it with future videos. Like Daughters of Kane, as I say, will be coming in the next week, I hope as well. So what I do is, first of all, there's three models I try and use to judge units. And there's always extra things in there. I've been very clear from this for a couple of people who put comments in. So power, defense, and speed. Essentially, there are three main purposes for your units in terms of winning the game. Obviously, it's not just a clumping exercise. It's very nice to get a big old army of orcs, for example, orcs, and charge across the board and smash into your enemy and crush their skulls beneath your feet. But to win the game, it's about playing the battle plan that usually involves capturing objectives and holding those objectives. For example, just an extreme case, before Kharadron Overlords got their, second edition battle tome, I remember playing my Blades of Khorne against a Kharadron Overlords player, good player, and they virtually destroyed every single model I had, and they had a healthy amount of their army left over. I still won, and I still won quite easily. Because I was able to hold on to those objectives. And sometimes that can be how you play the game. I'm going to dump a load of stuff on these objectives, and in order to take them off me, you're going to have to kill me. Oh, you're not able to kill me quickly enough? Oh dear. Now, it's not always as straightforward as that, because in quite a few battle plans, it ramps up the points as the battle rounds go on. So you can sometimes, it's better sometimes to hold them in battle rounds 4 and 5 than it is 2 and 3. From that point of view, actually, I think that's something where Age of Sigmar wins, because playing the long game is much better rewarded than, for example, in 40k. So the way I do it for power is the most complex. The other ones are relatively straightforward, and it's really just a comparative exercise. So to address someone who was suggested, oh, you can't do this because every time, because with this model, there's this problem, this problem. There's problems with every mathematical model. If it were possible to design a mathematical model that came up with a value for each unit based on their points, there'd be no such thing as underpointed or overpointed, because everything would just work. But in reality, there are other things in there that are very difficult to come up with a value for, and quite frankly, it's not worth it. And also, the value of a unit changes anyway, depending on how you use it, or even the battle plan itself. So, what I do for power is to basically work out what the loadout is, work out how many wounds I might expect this unit to do in a round of shooting. And I always base it on, an opponent with a 4-up save, but nothing else. So attacking a target unit with a 4-up save, because you've got to come up with something. So that's fairly beefy unit. Not a lot of things have that 4-up, but, it allows you to sort of, consider weaker units, but also stronger units. And then a round of combat doing the same thing, only the points value is weighted twice as much towards combat as shooting, because you can, if you're in combat, you can fight in both your turn and your opponent's turn, whereas you can only shoot in your own turn. So that's how that one is worked out, and I come up with a value. I went over that in the other one. I'm going to go over the values for all of the units soon. Then defense. So sometimes you just want a block to just block off your opponent. You may want it to sit on an objective and survive. You may want it to just intercept your opponent. Something to get in the way. They can't go around you. You've got to go through you. What is a defensive value? How long can it last? And all I do for that is I work out what I'd call effective wounds for the unit. So you can add up the number of wounds the unit has quite easily, but there's a big difference between a unit that has 20 wounds but basically no save and one that has a 4-up save, or a 4-up save followed by a 5-up ignore save. So you factor that in with effective wounds. So again, you have to say, well, what am I going to be facing? So I assume that they're going to be facing attacks that are -1 rend and 1 damage. Again, you've got to have some standard there. And that comes out with an effective wounds. And then all I do is I just do the points divided by that number of wounds to give it a defense score. Just like with power, the lower the number, the better. And then with speed, I just work out a likely charge range. So that is the movement of the unit plus its charge range. Bearing in mind that can be massaged up if it has, say, a re-roll charges, which some Hedonites of Slaanesh do. Some Hedonites of Slaanesh units can run and charge, so I factor in the average run roll as well. So you end up with a charge value, and again, I just do points divided by that charge range to work out a value. Again, this is just supposed to be comparative. There's no way of sensibly combining these three values to come up with one almighty value for a unit, because they're arbitrary measures. They work in comparing within each other. You cannot use those values to come up with an overall score for the unit with power, defense and speed. And it's really not worth the time to do so, because that's where your empirical thinking needs to come in, where you just consider how you would use that army in reality. So the final little points to go over, because some people brought up, for example, Fiends and Chaos Chosen as examples. I was pointing out the fact that the Sigmarist Twin Souls, for example, far from being overpointed for the damage they can do, they are the most points effective unit in the Hedonites of Slaanesh battletome. So in my sort of system here, I put it in order. Sigmarist Twin Souls at the top with a power value of 8. Remember, the lower the better. That basically means when I do the points value of the unit, and I always base it on minimum size units. Of course, it will go down a little, well, the value will go up a little bit, but they'll go down in effectiveness of points as you get as the unit's larger. Not only are you losing what is very likely a champion's extra attack, but you may not get all models into combat and all the rest of it. So we base it on minimum size units. Dread Pageant second. Dread Pageant can kick out a lot of damage. And the Slick Blade Seekers in third. So the top 3 ones in terms of damage output for their points value are, well, 3 new mortal ones. Obviously heroes tend to come quite low on this, but that's because heroes give you other things as well. If we take, for example, I mean, the top hero would be the Mask, which can kick out a lot of damage. The Mask's actually quite useful. I've not really included any lists, and I'm not sure I will. But it's always a shame, because it's quite handy with damage in terms of its, as heroes go. If I certainly wanted to go for a hero heavy army, I might consider it. But as heroes go, it can kick out the damage for its points. It's also reasonably defensive for its points. And speed is not bad. But at the same time, it's middling for all of them. And unless I had a particular reason to want a lot of heroes in, which with the new way depravity points is done, there's not that need to, or even desire to, really. But in terms of the ones that you may take, so Celeste, really good, and provides a very useful buff. And the first list I've looked at, and it's the only one I'll go over in this video, I wanted to put Glutos in it, because when I was talking about the new units and I didn't know the points values of them at the time, I thought that'd be an interesting one. It depends on the points values. Well, the points value for Glutos works out pretty well. 400 points is pretty good for him. You do have to remember with units like that though, Glutos, the Keeper of Secrets, Shalaxi Hellbane, when I work out my power value, I am conscious of the fact that they have a profile that degrades over time. So that inevitably sets them, you know, a bit worse than others. But again, you bear that in mind. At the same time, there's the benefit with Glutos. He provides useful buffs if you're going to take other mortal units, and that's what I've planned to do. I wouldn't build an army around Glutos unless it was going to have mortal units around him. And he's a double wizard. And he's pretty tough, actually. Even for his points, he is quite tough. And I'll go over that with the defense one, even taking account of the fact that his 5-up ignore wounds only works on a 2-up and only works until you've lost 5 wounds, in which case you lose that ability, although not all is not lost because you can have healing spells. Even taking that into account, he's very good value. If you just wanted something to stand in the way and block something off, I mean, I'm not suggesting you would use him for that. He's not bad, you know. His effective wounds for the points he costs is not at all bad. But in terms of the sort of power there, I mean, we've got Cymbaresh Twin Souls at the top, Dread Pageant, Slickblade Seekers, Fiends. You know, someone tried to say in a comment about, oh, not so good now, they might be cheaper, but they've lost this. They've lost on the defensive side of it. They've absolutely lost on the defensive side of it. But the damage they kick out now, and you're not encouraged to take like a double block like 6, you know, to have the 4 models needed to get the extra benefits. Because the benefit of that being gone is you just say, well, I'll just have 3 Fiends then. They're reasonably quick and they can kick out the damage. For their points, they're very good value. Demonettes, you've got 10 Demonettes, they're pretty good value as well. And they're battle line, so they're a handy one to take for battle line. So I think it's very likely there'll be a standard choice for battle line. The Hellstriders have dropped significantly down. They've changed a little, you know, the claw spears are a bit better than they were now because you get your benefit as you charge. You don't have to wait to do some damage and then get your benefit next combat phase if you survive. You can just charge it, and because they've got a hell of a charge range, they're actually better now, but because their points went up so much, they're not bad, but they're only just on the edge of not bad. And again, this is all comparative, isn't it? You don't take something that's not bad if you've got access to something that's great. So by the time you're getting down to that, it's not really good. But of the new mortal ones, I mean, Cymbaresh Twin Souls are fantastic. And I'm even taking into account the fact that they will only alternate between having the save on one battle round, and then the next battle round, it'll be the re-roll hits. You know, even taking that into account, they're very, very good value. The Dread Pageant is very good value. The Slickblade Seekers are amazing because, and I cannot now imagine building a list without them. They kick out the points. They're quite hard to shift because they've got a lot of wounds. And they're very fast because they're on Seekers. They're not as fast as Seekers because they don't get to sort of run and then charge, re-rolling the charge and all the rest of it. They can re-roll the charge, but they don't get to run and charge. So they've not quite got the range of Seekers, but they have still got, by the standards of units in other armies, a hell of a range to be kicking off with. So in terms of power, that's sort of how it would be looking there. Your hero choices, you'd be looking at Silesk, and again, the buffs that they provide would be amazing. Shalaxi Hellbane, Keeper of Secrets, and Glutos are all pretty good. The Lord of Pain is not bad, but bear in mind the other ones I've just mentioned are all wizards, and they bring other things as well. The Lord of Pain doesn't bring that much. He brings a command ability, which is good, but you know, you need the command point to be able to use it. Maybe I'd think in terms of a Lord of Pain if I was taking the Sybarites battalion, because then you'd be getting extra command points. If you were minded to load up on a lot of heroes and take that battalion so you could get the extra command points, I'd maybe think Lord of Pain, because you can then also take your Cymbaresh Twin Souls or the Painbringers, which I'll go over in a moment, as battle line. Maybe you could make something, but I'm not seeing it. And it's not worth it just to be able to take the Sigmar Twin Souls as battle line. I'm quite happy taking 3 units of 10 Demonettes. And I just don't think, in terms of what he will do himself, that he's worth the points. And also you'd have to make him the general, and he's not as defensive. I mean, I know he's got the 5-up ignore as well, but you know, his effective wounds are not as good as some that you could have. He could be targeted, he could be killed. So no, the Lord of Pain for me, I think, is a bit too much in terms of the points. For me to take anyway. So then on to the sort of second measure. Actually, no, before I go over that, I will just mention, because someone did bring up Chaos Chosen. And again, this is where you can look at the empirical way of thinking about it as well. So Chaos Chosen, I mean, someone suggested, oh yeah, not as good as Chaos Chosen. Well, actually they are, they're better. In terms of their value for the points, they're better. They kick out more damage, and when you work out that damage per points, they do work out better. And that includes taking into account marks of chaos, and you know, if you assume that unit of chosen would be within range of your general with the same mark of chaos, which it might well be. It might well be. I'm not sure how often it would be, because that would imply that your general in a Slaves to Darkness army would either be on foot or would be hanging back so that the Chaos Chosen didn't get out of their range. But let's just say, because they are a very, very good unit. But the other thing I would say is, even if the Chaos Chosen did work out better value for points in terms of what damage they can kick out, and bear in mind with the Marks of Chaos, they can sometimes have benefits that are not entirely related to damage, yes. But even then, you don't say something's overpointed because it's not as good value as like a really good unit. But then here's the other thing, and this is why you don't just go, oh, Sigmar Twin Souls, fantastic, really good value for the damage they can kick out for their points, and they're fairly well defensive as well. Oh, we must take them. Because when you look, for example, because again, it's about winning the games, it's about the battle plan, not just how much damage you can kick out. If you can't get it into the combats you want to get it in, for example, because it's not that fast, you lose the benefit. People will just plink it down with mortal wound spells or whatever from a distance. If you look at armies that have done very well in tournaments, like, you know, winning most, if not all of their games in Slave to Darkness terms, I've not seen really lists with Chosen in them. In fact, you'll more likely see Chaos Knights, which are nowhere near as good in terms of value for the points on this. But what they bring to the table is they are faster. They're more likely to be able to choose their combats. The Chaos Rune Shield makes them more defensible against mortal wounds, for example. You know, so it's not just about which one's going to finish on best on here. The reason why we use something like this and why it's important to use something like this is, I was trying to explain in a comment, you can't just go, oh, well, because you can't come up with a perfect model, we abandon it completely and we'll just trial and error, play games and improve and things like that. It's too many units to do that with. No, you start off with a mathematical model, you are conscious of its limits, but you use that you use it basically to exclude things that are clearly not going to work, focusing on the things that might work, and then come up with combinations, and then you try those out in playtesting. So in terms of speed, the ones that are best value in terms of that effective charge range, Seekers at the top, because they're massive range. They're not hideously expensive, 150 points for 5. You know, the Mask is pretty good for the points value, because the Mask can shift across the board. Again, it's just one of those, I just keep thinking. But every time I come up with a list, I am always dismayed to find that I haven't quite even managed to get the Dread Pageant in. I really want to do that. And the Mask costs 10 more points. So if I can't get the Dread Pageant in, I certainly can't get the Mask in. Hellstriders are still really good, even for their points in terms of their speed. So the speed value is really, can you get over to objectives really quickly? If that's what you're going to use them for, and if that was what I was going to use them for, I might be thinking in terms of Blissbarb Seekers, which are nowhere near the charge range, but you may not want them to charge, just to get over to objectives and be able to plink off a few arrows whilst trying to stay out of combat. But if you want to get that charge in, Seekers are always going to be really good for just belting across the board. The problem is that they're sort of not great in terms of the damage they'll kick out. They're also not, they're middling in terms of how defensible they are. So you can't just say, right, I'm going to charge across there and hold that unit up. It won't hold it up for very long. Unless, of course, you get really lucky and it does you a few wounds and you roll a 1 on your battle shock. You can't count on that happening. But, you know, that's just in terms of speed there. When it comes to speed, a lot of the units in Hedonites of Slaanesh are going to do really well. And unsurprisingly, there's a massive, massive difference between the cavalry, who often get to re-roll charges or can sometimes even run and charge, and some of the infantry. Although demonettes, in terms of infantry, are pretty good, which is again why I'm very comfortable taking them as my battle line choices, because they can move up very quickly. They can act as reasonable speed bumps. And you know what? Taking damage, not a problem with that, because that's just depravity points for me. And it won't be long before I can plonk down 30 of them if I wish, or whatever I want to do. Now, in terms of defensive things, because the ones I mostly favour are not so much speed, because if it can move somewhere but is ineffective when it gets there, it's not that brilliant. The ones I prioritise are speed and defence. Power, sorry, and defence. Is it going to be able to deal out some damage and take care of my opponent's tricky units? The speed really is mostly, if I look up a unit that's features high on power, so for example, going back to the Slaves of Darkness army, chosen very, very high there, speed not so high, can't choose my combats very easily with them. So I cannot pick and choose my combats. It may take me till battle round 3 before I can get into something that they're designed for. But in terms of defense, your Bliss Barb Seekers are your best value for points, because they have an effective wounds of 24. They've got 20 wounds, but their save against -1 rend and 1 damage would give them an effective wounds total of 24. And for their points, the old Bliss Barb Seekers actually represent the best value for points in terms of just stick something in the way as a speed bump. I'm not suggesting, as I say, it would be used for that, but it would be effective for that. Myrmidesh Painbringers are second on there. They represent pretty good value for that as well. And they're not bad in terms of damage. They're just not great, but they're not bad. They are better than average. So Myrmidesh Painbringers could well be, because they can re-roll their saves. So in melee combat, better than against shooting. Again, I've taken that into account here, sort of weighted it 50-50 from melee attacks as well as ranged attacks. But what is most encouraging is Slick Blade Seekers. So Slick Blade Seekers are an ideal unit to go and head something big off. It can kick out the damage and it's not easy to chew through. And it's fast. So this is why I'm looking at lists and I'm thinking, why? I'd always want to take a couple of units of them. Always want to take them. So the ones that, and again, this is what I use this list for. You know, what are the units that feature highly on all 3 scores, if that's what I need them to do. And then when you've got those units, can I make a sensible list? And if not, again, you sort of pick a few things out. So if I look at the list I'm thinking of at the moment, and this is going to take me some time for me to settle on even 2 or 3 different lists. I can't think I'll settle on one. It'll take a while, and partly that is because you sort of come up with a list in isolation, then you think, right, which host to give it to? And then you look and you go, oh, Pretenders, as I was talking about in the first video. I like Pretenders. And then you look and you think, oh, but I don't think this list would suit Pretenders that well. Oh, Godseekers, yeah, I mean, that's the one I'm naturally tuned with. But it'd be quite difficult to get the extra depravity points with that. But does that matter? And there's all these questions to ask. But as I say, first of all, I wanted to build a list based around Glutos. So I took him. I took a Keeper of Secrets and a Shard Speaker as my hero choices, making the Keeper of Secrets the general. I hadn't decided on command traits or artifacts yet, because I hadn't decided on which host might suit it. It may be that no host suits it and I just throw the whole thing in the bin. In terms of battle line, 3 units of 10 Demonettes, then 2 units of 5 Bliss Barb Seekers, not Bliss Barb Seekers, sorry, Slick Blade Seekers, fast and damaging ones. 2 units of 5 Simbaresh Twin Souls. Again, not tempted to take 1 unit of 10 because, you know, multiple units means getting more depravity points, especially later on. And what else did I take? It'll pop up on the screen. Do you know what? I've completely forgotten it. But the main thing I really wanted was the, I think it was Dreadful Visage. That was it, Endless Spell. really because that's all I had left. And out of, if you've got 40 points to spend on an endless spell, Dreadful Visage is not bad, because predatory endless spell, but if your opponent does manage to fire it back at you, you're at least getting some extra bravery out of it. So there is that, even if it does some mortal wounds to you. And it reduces the bravery of your opponent. So if they try and swing it your way and you're stuck in combat with them, they could do themselves some damage there, in terms of making it more difficult for them to pass battle shock, for example, or to avoid having models flee when they need to take that battle shock test. But that's sort of my look at that model. As I say, I'll do another one with Daughters of Kane, which I think is a bit less controversial anyway. And as battle tomes come out, I'd be aiming to do this sort of thing as well. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Until next time, I'll see you later.